Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to English grade 11. Students, I hope that you're doing well. You have been following all these lectures. Now today we are going to talk about our Unit 4 lecture 2A, and we have the learning outcome, actually 3 learning outcomes today. They are serving the same purpose. These are of reading competencies to enhance your reading comprehension. Not only reading, but reading out aloud, whether it's a fictional text or a non-fictional text, whether it's a prose or a poem. You need to understand that how you're going to use your voice, the pitch, the lows and ups of your voice in order to create an effect in your reading. So when you are reading aloud, when you're reading a play script in the class, or when you're delivering a speech, you need to emphasize, take care of the intonations, and also take care of your pitch of the voice. So the learning outcome which I have put on the very first is read with accurate pronunciation, appropriate pitch and voice variation suitable for fictional and non-fictional text. Why? Because fictional and non-fictional texts, there is a difference between them when we talk about reading them aloud. For example, in the previous classes, your teacher or your instructor must or might have actually included you in the reading of the class, so that you read the lesson for the whole class with the correct pronunciation, the correct way of saying those words, saying and reading, and also take care of your pitch of the voice and create a variation in your voice when you're reading it, which is suitable for fictional and non-fictional text. Next one, we will see that how when we are reading a text and in order to respond to it, we are asked some questions. You need to understand that how we can ask and answer higher order questions, higher order thinking skills or hot questions to guide or assess reading. For example, questions like, why is the author saying this right now? What is the purpose of the author of saying that particular thing? Or you might ask or answer a question that looks like this: why did the author choose this word? And how is this different from what I read somewhere else? So these questions are your higher order thinking questions. It means they require a very good comprehensive answer rather than yes or no, because those are your lower order thinking questions. We will differentiate between these two different kinds of questions and see that how can we answer those critical and comprehensive and thinking questions. Now, let's talk about the lesson. This is your vertical linkage of grade 10. And now for the brainstorming session, think about it. How do we respond to any text that we read? Because students, reading a text is one thing, and then responding to it, either asking questions from your instructor or the teacher and answering them as well when you are put forward these kind of questions in your oral test or in your written tests or in your examinations. So you are given something to read, and then to check your understanding or comprehension, you will answer some questions. And we will learn that how we can answer such questions. Now, I hope that you are aware that we respond to different kind of questions. They will be marked and the answers will be assessed as well. All right, today we have a poem. This is a poem called Equipment by Edgar Guest. It has 5 stanzas. Now, we are about to read a text which requires your correct pronunciation and your variation of the voice. Now you have to clear out your throat and read it accordingly. You can practice it by yourself later in order to understand it, in order to read it as it should be read. Let's start it. Figure it out for yourself, my lad. You've all that the greatest of men have had. 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. With this equipment, they all began. So start for the top and say, I can. Look them over, the wise and great. They take their food from a common plate. And similar knives and forks they use. With similar laces, they tie their shoes. The world considers them brave and smart, but you have all they had when they made their start. All right, let's read all these stanzas and we will talk about the theme and the message of this poem. And then you have to answer some questions. Now, these questions will require you to write more or speak more because they are higher order questions. In the next stanza, the poet says, you can triumph and come to skill. You can be great if only you will. You are well equipped for what fight you choose. You have legs and arms and a brain to use. And the man who has risen great deeds to do, began his life with no more than you. You are the handicap you must face. You are the one who must choose your place. You must say where you want to go, how much you will study the truth to know. God has equipped you for life, but He lets you decide what you want to be. Courage must come from the soul within. The man must furnish the will to win. So figure it out for yourself, my lad. You were born with all that the great have had. With your equipment, they all began. Get hold of yourself and say, I can. So, students, if you have listened to me clearly, you saw that I used passion, the variation of my sound, the pitch. Sometimes I read the poem with passion, with higher voice. Sometimes I read it with a very much empathy and sympathy. Now, the poem Equipment talks about, and it's a very famous motivational kind of poem which makes you motivate so that you can use the equipment that God has given you. And the equipments are your body, your mind also. All the great people, the successful people, the achievers have had the same kind of equipment that you have, that God has given you. But what is the difference then? It means the difference is that we need to recognize this equipment, recognize the importance and potentials that we have within ourselves, and then achieve bigger goals and objectives, just like the famous, the wealthy, the successful and wise people did in their life, and that's how they became successful. So we are no different than them. We all have the same equipment, if not the complete body parts, but we have the same mind, the same brain. God has not differentiated in giving us anything, no matter the class or the position. So you have the same kind of equipment. Now you are going to motivate yourself in order to use it better. So this is the motivation, and this is the main theme of your poem that we have just read. It means your hard work, using all the gifts that God have given you, using all these kinds of equipments that God has equally given us as human beings. So we need to use them correctly in order to achieve in our life, in order to make big achievements and help others and make the society better and leave a mark before you leave this world. So this is the whole message. This is the whole point of the poem. Now, this is a very motivational poem. So you have to read it with passion. You have to raise your voice and also use it low so that the emphasis is on the message correctly. Now, what you're supposed to do is practice this poem, all these different kinds of stanzas that we have, and read it with correct pronunciation, just like I did. And also try to play with your voice and do it according to the words, because words are powerful. So we need to say them with our better understanding and power. Why? Because we want to deliver the message. So whenever you're going to read your poem that you have written by yourself or any other poem, maybe in a speech, in a debate, or any other platform or scenario, you have to not to read it in monotonous sound or monotonous voice. You have to read it just like a poem is meant to be read. You have to focus on your voice and read it with correct pronunciation. Now, you have to read the given stanzas of a poem together with a partner and talk about how it relates to what we have learned in class. Not only this, but we know that poems are made up of figurative language. So we need to analyze the use of figurative language employed by the poet to convey his ideas effectively. So now, till now you have your lesson, you have your task. You have to read this poem or such poems which are motivational, which are delivering a powerful message, but you have to read them with power and with a good understanding. Take care of the pronunciation. If you're not aware of that, then you have to look up the pronunciation key in the dictionary or use the internet for understanding how the word is pronounced. You have to use the high pitch, the low pitch, and concern in your voice, sympathy or motivation, passion, power. So whenever you are reading a poem, you have to utilize all these reading devices in your reading. Now, when we are talking about a fiction, this is the title, The Mysterious Disappearance. This talks about an incident that happened. It has mystery. Now you have to make your voice mysterious and curious for the readers in order to engage them to listen to you. So you want to engage the audience or the listeners towards you with the use of your voice. Let's read it. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, a strange mystery had unfolded. One evening, the town's beloved librarian, Mrs. Willow, had vanished without a trace. Her bookshelves were neatly organized, her teacup was still warm on the table, and the door to the library was locked from the inside. Now, something happened. Something happened to the town's librarian, Mrs. Willow. She disappeared without a trace. So this gives you a sense of eeriness, a sense of mystery. What happened to her? So you have to make your expressions, your facial expressions and your gestures like you're telling a very mysterious and curious story. So you have to make your voice and tone in that same manner. Just like you're telling someone about something strange or unexpected that has happened. The townspeople were baffled. They were confused. What happened to Mrs. Willows? Mrs. Willow was a gentle soul, always smiling and eager to share her love of books. No one could imagine her willingly leaving the library, let alone disappearing without a word. So where did she go? There is some curiosity in this fictional text, and you have to portray the curiosity with the help of your voice, by raising your voice, maybe telling a secret or a scary story. So you have to read it accordingly, according to the genre and the kind of text that we have. So far we have learned how we can read a poem, or how we can also read a fictional text that talks about a mystery or a strange happening or a very strange case. Now, students, when we are responding to a text, we have to ask or answer some questions. Types of questions that we have are: number one, lower order thinking skills or LOTS questions. It means they are easy to answer. They can be answered with yes or no or very few words. But higher order thinking skills, these kind of questions require more than yes or no, and they require your intellectual input and your understanding. So in order to answer these kind of questions, you have to speak more words and clarify your interpretation and understanding of the question and answer it accordingly, according to the type of question that you are asked. So if we have higher order questions, we will answer them accordingly with detail. A higher order thinking question is a question designed to build a learner's understanding of the material. They are open-ended questions, whereas the lower order thinking questions are closed-ended questions. Open-ended question means they have more than one answer. They have more interpretations that require the use of critical thinking skills as opposed to simple recall or memory skills. Simple recall and memory skills, these are the LOTS questions, lower order thinking skills questions. But questions that require your understanding and your valuable input, they are higher order thinking questions, because now you're thinking highly, you're thinking critically. It means that your critical thinking skills and your comprehensive and interpretation skills are going to come in this scenario. Now, higher order thinking questions are something like this. Number one, what is the main theme of the poem Equipment? The main theme, let's talk about it. We have the answer over here. The central theme of the poem is that we all possess the same fundamental tools: the brain, the body, hands, eyes, ears, and nose that we can use for success. The poem emphasizes self-confidence and hard work, inspiring readers to utilize their inherent abilities, 2 hands, 2 legs, and a brain to achieve their goals. And this is our equipment that God has granted us, just like the great individuals before them. People who have achieved bigger goals, they left a very good impact on the society. They had the same kind of equipment. So you also possess the same, and now you are going to be motivated to use them correctly. This is the central idea. You see that I did not answer it with yes or no, nor I did answer with lower order, with closed-ended questions or answers, but these are open-ended questions. It means it has more than one interpretation. Every student can come up with their own critical understanding from experience and their interpretation. Now, we have question number 2 that you need to answer after reading this poem. What is the mood of the poem? The mood of the poem is to motivate you. It is a very motivational and a poem full of gratitude. So the poem mood is being grateful, having gratitude and motivational. What is the metaphor in the 4th stanza of the poem? Explain. So in the 4th stanza, if we go back, this one, you are the handicap you must face. It means you are the problem that will come before you, but you have to overcome them. So you are the handicap. This is a metaphor that the poet used. So we can talk about the metaphor in detail. And another higher thinking question that you can answer by reading the poem is, how do you think dreams can inspire or influence creative ideas? Why should we dream? Why should we have goals? What is your understanding? So you can write a passage, maybe 2 paragraphs on this higher thinking question. Number 5, how does the poet suggest that young people can achieve greatness? What qualities or actions does he encourage them to embrace? Now, we know that The young people can achieve greatness by actually understanding their potential and gift that Allah has given them and perform them in a better way. So we can go on and write a very comprehensive and long answer of this higher order thinking question. So higher order thinking question requires you to understand each stanza and talk about some things. So if you talk about the third stanza, let's understand the question. In the third stanza of the poem, the poet repeats the pronoun you. Which poetic device is being used in the successive clauses? So we know that this is a second person narration. The point of view is second person. Why? Because the poet wants to engage with the reader or the listener directly. So he used the poetic device which is according to the second person narrative or second person perspective. Why do you think that repetition is important? In the poem, there is a lot of repetition. Repetition leaves a very good impact and it emphasizes the important points that we have in our poem. That's why the poet repeats so many different verses and words in order to tell you that this is the very important part of the poem. If you talk about the tone, what is the tone of the poem, or what is the attitude of the poet that is used in the poem? The attitude is very optimistic, it is very much motivational, and the poet wants you to recognize your potential. So the tone is not negative, it is not derogatory, it is not negative or pessimistic. Rather, the tone is very much optimistic and motivational. It is very encouraging. The poem is full of encouragement that you can see. Again, in the fourth stanza, the poet uses a metaphor. What is that metaphor? You have to find it out by yourself. What is the metaphor in the fourth stanza of the poem? And you have to explain it. So these questions, as you have seen, we have to understand these questions, what they are asking us, and how we can answer them with our understanding. Obviously, the answer cannot be yes or no. It has to be comprehensive and full of interpretation. Now, students, I hope that you can read different poems and fictional text according to the genre and also according to the low and high of your voice and your voice variations. In the worksheet, you will read this given different paragraphs and answer some higher order thinking questions. You will get these questions. There is enough space on the worksheet to solve these questions by taking out the print, and you can actually understand these questions and solve them better. So this is all about today's lecture, students. I hope that the learning outcome is clear. If we go back to our students' learning outcomes, first, we read the poem according to how it should be read. We take care of the pronunciation, appropriate pitch that is related to our voice, and voice variation which is suitable. Then we talked about asking and answering higher order question. Why did the poet say this? What do you mean when the poet said this or that? So these are higher order questions that require critical thinking. Why did the author choose this word? Why did the author called brain and all these different parts of your body and equipment? Because using this equipment, this tool, we can utilize it and reach our goals and perform our activities and achieve our success. So these are all the higher order thinking questions for which we use the short form HOTS. It means higher order thinking skill questions. I hope, students, that we have successfully learned, and now you have to answer these remaining questions that you have read in the poem and give your answers. And this is how you will respond to the text, because responding is the potential, and it is 50% of the job that you need to do now. Thank you so much. I hope that I will see you in the next video lesson. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.